Okay.
I think that there are a lot more gay and bi and, well, just not straight men in the West, but because of the repression around it, they're reserved and you don't see it so out in the open. And if you come to a country like Thailand, where it is fully accepting of it, you see it on a much greater level. A lot of straight guys do have these stupid homophobic tendencies, such as believing that every man who is bi or gay wants to f*** them.
I wanted to touch on, you made an interesting video about the LGBTQ culture in Thailand.
Yeah.
And the kind of differences between the concept of trans there and here in the West.
Yeah, it's really interesting, Thailand, because it stems from Buddhism, the reason that they're so open. And I don't know, have you been to Thailand before?
No, I'd like to.
So if you come to Thailand, particularly if you go to cities like Bangkok, you'll notice how gay it is. There are a lot of gay men and very effeminate men, and then the ladyboys as well. And they actually have a term, one of the Thai words for it's not just ladyboys, basically effeminate men. So like your femmes, your twinks, like very, very camp men, but then the ladyboys, they call them katoi. And it essentially summarizes this group of biological men who are highly feminine. And they're very tolerant and they're very open as well. Like Thai people are very flirty. Gay men here are very, very direct with things. Like they're a lot more open about this, and it's because it isn't influenced by Abrahamic religion culturally, where homosexuality is a sin, right? And you're judged, you go to heaven or hell. Out here, it's your sexuality and your gender identity doesn't interfere with your journey to nirvana, to enlightenment. I mean, there is also an element that they believe in karma. So some of them will see the reason that you're gay or you're a ladyboy is because of bad karma in the past, which is why you're not aligned with like the normal gender. But they're very tolerant, very, very tolerant of things. And at the same time, they don't have all the trans activism. And the ladyboys, some of them will say I'm trans, but a lot of them they don't. They just don't even consider themselves to be trans. They say, no, I'm not a woman. I'm a ladyboy. It's kind of its own thing, and it's widely accepted. It's very out in the open. It's widely accepted. It's normal, and you don't have all the tension around it.
Yeah, it sounds like a dream in comparison to what we've got here, because it's just a whole new religion, and I'm sure you're familiar with all the crazy trans activism. So yeah, I just want to get your opinion on it first, in terms of how you described your sexuality, basically, and then I'll explain why I'm interested.
Yeah. So for me, it was. I mean, it's something that I repressed a lot growing up. I guess in normal labels, maybe I would fit into being bi. But I see sexuality as a bit more of a complicated spectrum than just the arbitrary definitions of like gay, bi, straight. I guess it's kind of fluid. Is maybe a way that I've experienced it, but generally that I'm attracted to femininity, right? And I like very feminine women, but I might also be drawn to a very effeminate gay man, and attracted to the ladyboys, etc. So that's the way that I see it. The West is very progressive, but I would say actually on sexuality, in a lot of ways it isn't. And being in Thailand is quite interesting to see that, because I think that there are a lot more gay and bi and, well, just not straight men in the West, but because of the repression around it, they're reserved and you don't see it so out in the open. And if you come to a country like Thailand, where it is fully accepting of it, you see it on a much greater level.
Have you heard of a word called gynandromorphophilia?
Gynandromorphophilia. So something to do with attraction. If it ends with philia, philos, gyn. Is that to do with female genitalia?
People call it GAMP for short. So I can send you a link to something about it. So essentially, this is an attempt to categorize a type of sexuality, which sounds a bit similar to what you said, which is basically men who are attracted to women and then feminine men. And what it typically refers to now is men who are into, in the West, it will refer to men who are into women and trans women, basically. So you know, one thing I critique a lot is trans, and what we're seeing in this explosion, why certain people are driven to transition, and why for some people it's not a good decision, and for some it may be. But one thing that drives feminine gay men towards transition is, on one side, you have the society might reject their femininity and say there's something wrong with you. And in order for them to be themselves, it's easier to then kind of live as a woman.
Yeah.
But then on the other side is actually these type of bisexual men that sound similar to how you described yourself, not being able to admit that they're into feminine men. And they in order for them to actually satisfy their desires, they almost need these men to be trans women so that they can still call themselves straight. You know, you see men going viral on the internet that have a trans woman partner, and you know, she still has a dick and everything, and they're like, no, but I'm still straight. To me, it's like you have these two different sides, which is causing men to transition, and so they can find their partners in this way. And I just think it's very interesting to hear you talk about it so openly, because I think the most I hear this talked about from a man will be, they'll say, I'm into women and trans women. But for you to actually say I'm into women and feminine men, I think that is really something a lot of these men can't admit to themselves.
Yeah,
You
because
know?
of homophobia, and I recently decided that I should start speaking about it because I actually felt that I was living a bit of a lie by not being open, especially being a men's influencer and talking about masculinity. You know, most people when they meet me, they will assume that I'm straight, right? And for me myself, I actually worried that I would lose engagement from straight guys, because a lot of straight guys do have these stupid homophobic tendencies, such as believing that every man who is bi or gay wants to fuck them, and they can just be a little bit, they can be suspicious. And you know, I often when I meet people, I don't want to say it straight away in case they immediately then get the wrong impression and think that I'm trying to hit on them, when actually, like, I am very laddish in the way I do things. You know, I do Muay Thai, kickboxing, I played rugby, I go to the gym. Like, I am quite direct, and especially talking about sex and things like that with women. But then the moment I said, like, oh, that feminine guy is really attractive, they act weird, guys when they do it. They act really surprised, and it's like, mate, it's just like, get over it. Like, it's fine. And yeah, I know I'm waffling here, but I essentially felt that it was important for me to just be open about it. Another thing that I will say as well is that I get enough gay men being very thirsty in my DM, so I didn't really want to open the floodgates for more of that.
Yeah, but I can imagine. I mean, I've heard because from my research in this, there's a very particular type of guy who's has the kind of proclivity you talked about, but the guy themselves is very masculine. They're not camp. And these are the type of men you see going after trans women. I mean, when I talk to trans women and hear about the kind of attention they get, it's not from gay guys like me, you know? It's not from camp, you know, just the kind of the image of a gay man most of us are used to being given. It's these kind of very masculine men who are often closeted. And it happens too to just even very feminine gay men, because they think they're some sort of trans woman. But I think it's really good that you're talking about that, because it's something I see very little, and I think it's quite sad, really, that it's twofold, because you have the men themselves being able to admit what they like, but then you also have way too many feminine gay men taking estrogen, getting surgery, when, you know, perhaps they may not have needed to if their dating pool was open-minded enough to just accept the fact that they're into it.
Exactly. And again, this is, you know, effeminate men in the West do get discriminated against by straight men. Some straight guys can be really fucking horrible. And I mean, look, you see this in particular when they're growing up. I don't know how it is now, But I remember when I was at school, there was a lad in our year who was blatantly gay. He was so feminine, and he dated girls. But then by the time we got into the end of sixth form, he came out. But the guys were fucking horrible to him, man, just because he was feminine, and they could tell that he was obviously gay and a feminine gay man. But he got so much shit for it, and that's obviously going to encourage people to repress. And I also think this may well contribute to why you will have seen it yourself. Some very feminine gay men are really horrible. They're really nasty and bitchy. Like some of the queens, man, like just unprovoked, just horrible, especially to masculine straight men. And I see that as essentially an adult expression of repressed pain and bullying as a child. I used to work on the doors of a nightclub in Leeds, and next door was Leeds' main gay bar called Viaduct, and the queens would be round the back smoking a cig, and they were fucking nasty sometimes to the other lads that I was working with, who were like Essex boys, very straight, but completely unprovoked, unprovoked. And yeah, it's a shame. It is a shame, because I think that is most likely a consequence of the discrimination that they face when they're younger. And a lot of men are afraid to be open about their sexuality. And another thing that I'll say actually with part of this is because a lot of women can be quite homophobic too. They're generally more tolerant of you, if you're gay as a friend. But there's some data that's shown that women are less attracted to bisexual men, and they won't like to admit it. But again, like I spoke about this with my ex, who is bi. She's from the Netherlands, so they're very progressive on sexuality. And she said it herself. She was like, yeah, I think it's because most women see being gay as feminine, so they're not attracted to it. And that's obviously, if men hear that, they're going to be like, oh shit, if I'm bi, like, am I going to lose this pool of women because they think that I'm something different? There's like a more kind of covert homophobia, I would say, that you can find with women, whereas with men it can be a bit more outright.
Do you think part of that too is kind of a sense of competition? Because I guess a feminine man will be able to give you a type of sexual experience and drive and sort of agreement than a woman ever will. So I feel like there's they perhaps feel a bit intimidated.
Yeah, you can see that. I mean, if you watch like the difference between straight porn and gay porn, for example, like you can see that the way that men engage with each other tends to be a lot more go for it, very, very intense, but in the way that men want, right? And when you find a woman that fucks you that way, it's like, keep her. But a lot don't. It's not the way that they are. So yeah, it's possible. It is possible that there is that competition element too. Yeah, I can see a kind of evolutionary explanation for it.
Is it something does it become a problem with dating for you or anything like that, with disclosing it or your sexuality?
Yeah, so throughout the past, I've often not really been as open about it, or I'd leave it a little bit of time before I talk about it, because I was concerned that they might be less attracted to me. I mean, this is a general thing anyway that I think a lot of men have, is they don't want to be seen as feminine. The Hamza spoke about this, how he realised that he would be very self-conscious if he was sitting with his legs like this instead of like across in the masculine way, right? These sorts of things. So I think generally there's this thing in my head of not wanting to be seen as feminine, even though I am naturally more masculine. But we all have masculine and feminine within us, and a true masculine man incorporates that. I've forgotten the term that they use for it. They embody it. They learn to embody the feminine within them as well, right? I can't remember where I'm going with this, but in dating, normally I tend to just keep it quiet, but as of recently I've been more open. Like, I'm attracted to femininity. I'm masculine.